While I love the internet, if I want to get a focused look at a particular topic, I do love to read, whether it's photography books, business books, or other books. So let's dive into the 5 best books that I read this year, and I think other photographers should check out as well. Let's get to it. And if you stick around till the end, you can find out how to learn more about everything that I read this year. But let's hit the top stuff right now. I'm Aaron from techphotoguy.com. I talk about tech, photography, photo business, and let's start right off with one of my favorite books of the year. These are presented in no particular order, and you'll find links to all of them down below, so you can grab them from your favorite online retailer. So we're going to start off with The Real Deal, Field Notes from the Life of a Working Photographer. This is Joe McNally's look back at his life's work. Joe has been a working editorial and commercial photographer based out of New York for 40 plus years at this point. He's done everything from newspapers to presidents to National Geographic and everything in between. And Joe went to school to become a journalist, to become a writer. And that writing talent shows in this book because while there are beautiful images, they're accompanied by Joe's beautiful words, where he talks about his experiences as a photographer, the people that he's met along the way, the gear that he's worked with, the companies that he's worked with. And this is just a wonderful photo book. I'd highly encourage you to get the hardcover version of this. You can admire Joe's work and learn from him because he's been a generous person with photographers over the years. I had a chance to interview him earlier this year. I'll drop a link to that up above and down below. But check out my conversation with Joe where he talks about this book and his experiences. Let's shift to a book that's not by a photographer. It's actually a book by a writer, and that is The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. This is not a new book. This was a reread for me, but I love Steven Pressfield's take on the production of creative work because as a writer, he needs to write words for his books, for his stories, for his publications. And it's very applicable to photographers as we look at trying to find that creative inspiration, trying to find the ethic to get to work and do the work. Pressfield's words on how we do that, how we overcome the resistance, the force that he describes that holds us back from doing our best work. The War of Art is one of those books that I think every person in a creative profession should read. And I think you probably ought to reread it every few years. And that's what this was for me. So be sure to check out The War of Art. Another piece I want to look at is another photo book. This one actually I just finished reading just a few days ago as I record this, and it's The West Wing and Beyond, What I Saw Inside the Presidency. This is a book from Pete Souza, who was the chief White House photographer under President Obama all 8 years. And Souza did a great job of kind of laying out some of the behind the scenes of the presidency. There's very few pictures of Obama in this book. In fact, you don't really see any like Obama portraits. It's all behind the scenes. It's the staff, it's the rooms, it's the scenes. It's the situations, and he lays it all out like you're walking through the White House. He talks about it by the section of the buildings, from the personal quarters to the Oval Office to the Outer Oval to the different areas that the president works in, the people and the scenes that make that happen. Much like the book with Joe McNally, Souza has a way with words, and I really enjoyed the words that went along with the photos. This is another one I would recommend getting the analog version of to check out. Let's take a different take now, and let's jump over to The Mindful Photographer by David Ulrich, which is somebody else I had a chance to interview this year. And so again, I'll drop a link to that down below. This is a book that makes us think about the process of photography and think about the photos that we're making. You may have heard of mindfulness and meditation and things like that. And this is not so much about formal mindfulness, but it's more about being a photographer who makes work with purpose and makes work with intent, and someone who uses our cameras to make work that's going to have meaning for ourselves and meaning for the world that we live in. This is a book that made me think, and I would encourage you to get it and think about it as well. You'll think about how you approach different scenes. You'll think about how you choose how many images to make. You'll think about the obvious shots versus the non-obvious shots. So check out The Mindful Photographer if you really want to think about your photographic process. And then the last book that I'm going to mention here today, wrapping up my top 5 for the year. You're going to chuckle about this, but it's a children's book. It's Extraordinary Women with Cameras, 35 Photographers Who Changed How We See the World. It was written by Darcy Reed, illustrated by Vanessa Perez. I had a chance to chat with them, link down below. But this is a illustrated book about women photographers. And there's names there that you will probably recognize: Dorothea Lange, Annie Leibovitz. Of course, they're all going to, jump right out of my head as I'm trying to think of them. But if you check this out, you're going to learn a little bit. I definitely did. But this is a perfect book to give to, your niece, your nephew, your own child. A friend's child, whether it's a boy or a girl, it doesn't matter. This is just a great book about photography. And I found it interesting in that it's a good way that as a photographer, I can give something to the younger generation that isn't just maybe a toy camera or talking to them about making pictures. It actually allows them to think about photography and the importance of photography for themselves. So check out those books. As I mentioned, links are down below to all of the books that I talked about, as well as the author interviews I mentioned. And I mentioned, if you want to find out about everything I read this year, along with quick summaries and kind of my thoughts on those, be sure to subscribe to my newsletter, Focusing Photography. There's a link down below. It comes out every week, and one of the things you're going to find this coming week when it comes out is I'm doing my What I Read in 2022 recap. And so you'll be able to hear a little bit more about these 5 books. You'll hear about the other stuff that I read that maybe didn't quite make it to that top 5 list, but is still worthy. And, I'll be honest, there's a couple books there that I'm going to mention that I spent time with that maybe I shouldn't have spent time with because they weren't super beneficial for me. But you can get all that if you subscribe to that newsletter. So as we wrap up 2022, we move into 2023, I'd encourage you to keep learning through whatever method that is. A book can be a great way to focus in on a particular topic. A photography book can be a great way to look at some fantastic photos. These were some of my favorites. As we roll into the new year, I hope things are going well for you. Go and subscribe to the channel for more of this type of content. And until I come back with you, take care.